Welcome to Exhuming the Truth, the podcast where we delve into the mysterious worlds of cold cases, missing persons, true crime, and the fascinating science that is forensics. I'm forensic scientist and criminologist Asha Walther, and I am so thrilled to have you with me on this journey as we dance in the shadows of the world of crime, shining a light on scientific discovery while becoming another voice for those who need it most. So grab a drink and get comfortable while we jump into this episode together. Hi guys, I hope you had a beautiful weekend. It has just been the most perfect weather in Perth today. I think it got to like 34 in the city, but it was 32 here, and it was amazing because I actually got to sit outside and do some casework, so it was really nice. Now, I do have a lot to update you with in housekeeping, so thank goodness for chapters. I know the chapters are on Spotify. Hopefully they're on all platforms. I'll have to check that. So you'll be able to jump ahead or back or what have you. So I'm going to get straight into that. But today's episode, we are doing part 2 of Justice for Betty Shanks. So we'll get into that in a moment. First, I'm going to have a little chat with you because there's a lot going on right now. First up, I have to briefly mention that Gus Lamont, the little boy in Yunta, is still missing, which is incredibly sad. I am unsure of the update, I guess, on the search, so we'll have a look into that and get back to you. But first up, I have a couple of headlines that are relevant to our work in Australia right now that you might be interested in. Just want to touch on them and how it relates to you and me and all of us and the human condition, essentially. So there was actually a recent report from the Human Rights Watch flags. One of the ongoing rights crises in Australia was highlighted, and I found this really interesting. It was that children are being detained in adult facilities, including in WA and Queensland. And this obviously speaks to how vulnerable people, especially children, can become swept into systems not built for them. So in the justice and criminal system sphere, I suppose, the wrongful conviction remains a huge under-acknowledged issue. And I did a bit of reading on it because it really shocked me. And one recent analysis basically said that Australia is lagging other developed countries in our reviews and remedying of wrongful convictions. And when we talk about exhuming the truth, this is very much what we mean, digging into where systems fail and where people get left behind. And of course, the larger systemic issues at play, like the overrepresentation of Indigenous Australians in criminal justice, the gaps in protection and justice for children, hidden harms, deaths in custody and things like that, they're not separate from what we talk about, they're central. So I wanted to put that out there, and you're probably sitting there thinking, what does this mean for us, like as listeners? And it means that each time we unpack a case story and each time we bring someone's lived experience to the microphone, we're not just telling a story, we're actually bearing witness, you and I both, to the systems that have allowed it and the resilience that carried it, and thinking with you about how we can make change happen. And that brings me to Tremaine Desmond Reed's case that has taken off online, which is fantastic. I've only weeded out a couple of bad eggs from those posts, which is awesome. Usually, there's a lot of risk to online exposure. And unfortunately, particularly a lot of racist comments when we are covering Indigenous Australians, and it's not okay. And in this case, we've had a lot of support for Tremaine's story and his case, so I am very, very grateful to everybody for that. Now, on the business side of things, so obviously this is Exhuming the Truth and it's going to stay Exhuming the Truth, but we have opened a not-for-profit arm. So think of us as a body, and we have our for-profit arm and our not-for-profit arm. Just to quickly tell you, so you're clear on what you're supporting, what you're listening to. The podcast is always going to remain the for-profit arm. We don't actually really make anything off the podcast. It's literally for community benefit. and for case benefit and exposure. But if it ever somehow did make money, that would be to pay me for my time. So that's basically what for-profit is. Now, the not-for-profit arm is going to be a lot of advocacy work, and that money and any money that we get through there goes straight back into the business operations. So that's just the difference. So let's expand on that a little bit. The not-for-profit arm is going to have some digital products and like a broader ecosystem of exhuming the truth, essentially. So I'm super duper 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 proud to share that we are well into the approval process for our not-for-profit arm of the work. And as many of you know, the purpose behind this is to anchor our mission of moral and trauma-informed and emotional learning tools for kids, as crime prevention, lots of things like that, promoting STEM education for kids, and even for adults. And that just means that the not-for-profit arm is for the dedication to public benefit. So any benefits are not mine. They're for us as a community and to make the country a better and safer place. So that's as easy as I can sort of expand on that. I do have a lot of things for kids coming for the not-for-profit arm, and how stupid of me to not introduce what the name is. So the not-for-profit arm does have to be under a different name just because it is a public company. So instead of a business, it's a company, and it is Exhuming the Truth Hope Project. So hopefully you get that to stick, and hopefully you've had a look at our new logo for the NFP arm. I know I'm rambling, but I only want to touch on this on one episode and not, in the next 5. So again, feel free to skip. But this matters a lot to me because it matters a lot to you and to the community and to the future of our country and our kids. And we're basically signalling to schools and funders and community partners that we're serious and we're professional and we're accountable, and it's opening up things that are going to help us accelerate our reach. Now, we are operating Australia-wide as well. That's super important. Now, what does this mean for you? Basically, when you're engaging with the podcast by listening or sharing with a friend or subscribing, rating, commenting, you're helping amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. And that's the entire purpose of this podcast. And when we start to launch visual resources like workshops and kid-friendly tools and things like that, you've got the opportunity to participate and to contribute. Obviously, we have Sleuth Society coming as well, and that is going to be a community-based investigations group that I've created. If you're a teacher or a practitioner, once the not-for-profit arm is entirely active, you'll have access to specialist resources. And then for obviously our main purpose for our survivors and for families touched by crime, our structure is built so that your story is respected and you're helped along the way. So yeah, I will shut up about that now. But thank you for being here, and thank you for caring enough to allow us to get to this point. We've put a lot of time and effort into this. It's all self-funded. Everything so far is very much volunteer work. So we appreciate it very, very much. And I'm going to get into the episode now so you don't run away and get bored. Welcome to part 2 of Justice for Betty Shanks. Now, I jumped deep into this rabbit hole, you guys. I did part 1 and I was like so invested in this case. Because there were a couple of things of significance to me when I looked at it. So I'll quickly recap. We've got Betty Shanks. So this was in Brisbane. It was in 1952, so it is the state's oldest cold case. Remember, we spoke about that. There was no CCTV, no kind of modern forensics. And Betty Shanks was 22 years old. Essentially, she had hopped off the tram one night and never made it home. She was found murdered the next day. Now, I found this a cold case that I honestly think can be solved. So I went hard into this, deep into a rabbit hole. And essentially, my main reasons for thinking this can be solved is we have some very telling factors, and we have the tram ticket, that was in her hand. We have crime scene photos. We have a lot of forensic detailed evidence, but hasn't been processed, obviously, because of forensics at the time, there are potential for reanalysis if we can get better quality photos from the archives. And the main one is that her watch stopped at the time of her death. Now, as I dug deeper into this, it got, a lot more detailed. And from the time of the tram stopping to the time of her watch stopping, which was the end of her life, that gives us a time frame of 12 to 15 minutes. So we're not sitting here being like, oh, what time did this happen? It happened the day before, blah, blah, blah. This is a 12 to 15 minute window that we're working with. And there have been a couple of witnesses that I found that had spoken out. So we're going to go through that. There had been a couple of theories and things like that that I'll briefly touch on. I have not put a script together today because it's just all coming straight out of my brain because I'm so heavily in this right now. So let's do it. So, Betty Shanks. Now, when you're first looking up Betty Shanks and you've gone just past the surface level, so you've had a look at the story and the timeline of the crime, or the Crimeline as I like to call it, you will find that there was a book. Now, this book is titled Who Killed Betty Shanks? Brisbane's Greatest Murder Mystery. And this was the first ever book published about this case. Now, essentially, to summarise that, this book basically theorises that the target of Betty's murder was in fact not Betty, and they're kind of saying, well, the target was actually a receptionist who worked at a doctor's office, because she used to use the same tram at the same time, but on that particular day, she decided to catch the earlier tram than usual, but on that day only. So they actually missed her and got the wrong person. So that's what that book says, essentially, okay? They did make a part 2. So they've done I Know Who Killed Betty Shanks 2nd edition, which was actually published in 2019, so it's much more recent. And then they've obviously as well gone on to publish a 3rd edition. So this person, Ted, has obviously updated with new information that came in. So I was like, I'm just going to go with the 3rd one. I'm not even going to bother with 1 and 2 just because it's going to theorise of things like the doctor receptionist, which I believe is false. As well as looking back into this case, you can find articles on the Queensland Archives, which are really, really interesting. And these newspaper articles are on Trove newspapers, which is super old. It basically has a photograph of what the newspaper looked like, and you can kind of read it off there, which is very cool because it's not something that we usually do. Then we have other articles. We've got one that was found in the Telegraph and the Truth newspaper, which is also available at the State Library in Queensland on microfilm, which I would absolutely love to go and access, but I am not in that state. If you are and you want to, please send me a message. Now, remember before how I said, like, there might not have been modern forensics at the time, but there was unlimited forensic evidence then, okay? And I'm going to touch on that because this is important. Now, her arms and legs were noted down that they had black boot polish. This seems very, very small information, micro. But when you think about 1952 and what people are wearing, let me paint you a picture, because the photographs that we do have of the crime scene has the police present, has the media present, and has the public present, all there gathering around the scene. You can't tell one from the other unless they are literally holding a camera or something else. And why is that? Because they all dressed in suits. Now, I'm talking about men, of course. If that was a cross between of course and obviously. I'm talking about men because this was obviously committed by a man, judging by the evidence. So when you're looking at the men in 1952, they are wearing suits. And what do they wear with suits? They wear their dress shoes. So this is really important because we're talking about a man who wore black shoes, black dress shoes. Okay, so just note that somewhere. Make a mental note. Now, diving back before this happened and on the same day. Now, Betty Shanks, like I said in part 1, she did work during the day and then she studied at night time. She got the tram most days, if not every day. So she was familiar with the routes, she knew how to get to and from, etc. She was very hardworking and dedicated. She actually contributed her own money to her parents' household with things like renovations and things like that. But on that day, so she had gone to work and then she had gone to university. So her and two other students on that very day, so the two other students were from the same class at university, were actually driven partway home by their lecturer, Edward Milliken. I think that's how you say it. Now, he had dropped Betty Shanks at tram stop 19. And this is in Windsor, and this is where she boarded the tramcar 434, which was bound for Grange. So that's really important because the two other students both had very consistent recollections of this. They were in the vehicle with Betty and with their lecturer, Edward, and that's where Betty was dropped off, and that's where she boarded the tram, okay? And this is very important because it gives us a timeline and it contributes to all the little bits and pieces that make up the kind of mosaic puzzle, if you will, for this case and, well, for all cases. Now, I do have a couple of photos which I'm happy to share, but we have the Brisbane Tramway Network, which is the establishment that runs these trams. And this establishment was operational between 1885 and 1969. So it was very much relevant at that time. And this photo that I do have is the old 434 route, which is the route that she took from the road and the tram stop where she was dropped to Grange Terminus. So that would be her whole journey. So where she was dropped at the tram by Edward and boarded that tram, and where she hopped off at the Grange Terminus by her house. It's about a 5-minute walk, I believe. Now, again, we're talking about fine details in this case. This is all very much a timeline given to us by the evidence. Like, the tram left at set times. People boarded and exited the trams at set times. So at 9:32 p.m. was when Betty exited the tram at Grange Terminus on Days Road, and she was heading toward Thomas Street. And that was the last time she was seen alive by another witness. She was heading towards Thomas Street from Days Road. Again, I have a map that I can share for better visuals for you guys. But so that precise time was 9:32. So that's when she's hopped off the tram. Now, between 9:38 and 9:53 was the precise timing when she was beaten and killed and left in the backyard of a home on Carberry Street. And this is very important because 7 people, including the residents of the home, reported hearing screams at around 9:40 p.m. So that is a pretty stable timeline. Now, as we said in part 1, we had Constable Alex Stewart, who was the off-duty police officer, who also was one of the 7 people who heard the scream. He was actually next door to where this had happened. So he hears the scream, he looks out his front window at Thomas Street, which was the street in which she was last seen alive. And he also looked to the school grounds across the road, but he saw nothing and kind of took it as a nothing. Now, his view of the neighbour's yard where she was left, that didn't allow him to see the attack happening metres away. So it was super close to him. The scream would have been very clear to him, but he didn't have view of that particular spot where she was. But he was the one. So she was reported missing at around 1:30 a.m. by her mother. So Stewart was aware that there was a missing person, but he just wasn't on duty yet. So he actually got up and discovered Betty Shanks at 5:35 a.m. the following morning when he was collecting his morning paper. Because from out the front where his paper would be delivered, he was able to see that section of the yard. Now, it's super important to note too that Betty Shanks was beaten so badly that several of her teeth were actually found meters away from her body. And I did say that in the last episode, but in the last episode, we only had the details of one tooth. As the deeper I got, the more information I got, there was several teeth found meters away from her body. Now, her face and her legs had traces of the black boot polish that we spoke about. That was where there was evidence that she had been kicked, and there was also an imprint on her forehead. This is also super important because, again, when we're talking about 1952 and people wearing similar attire, dress shoes, it's very easy to tell a shoe print apart because they have different patterns. And of course, we have people in dress shoes with certain patterns because there wasn't 600,000 different types of shoes back then. And also there were the army boots, which had a different imprint, so make a mental note of that. Now, there was no evidence of sexual assault, but her underwear was removed and her bra straps were broken. So this, to me, screams sexually motivated but interrupted. Now, in terms of more forensic evidence, there were 2 bloody handprints on a neighbouring fence. This is obviously the perpetrator or the offender, whatever you want to call him, and they were very large. So they're giving us a clue there as well. Now, it is said by literally everyone and anyone that knew Betty Shanks that she was very well liked, well respected, and didn't have a partner at the time, kind of wasn't the trouble causer or anything like that. So that's very important for her character. But let's talk about the theories, because there's a couple in here, and one of them I'm on board with. So first we have the doctor. So days after Betty Shanks was reported murdered, a local doctor commits suicide, which is very, very sad. So this caused a lot of speculation about connection. So they're basically people being like, oh, he's killed himself because, maybe he killed Betty. So there was, a couple of bits and pieces speculating that that was related and it was him and he couldn't deal with the guilt. So he had, passed away. So that was one theory. I don't believe it for a second. Then there was a soldier theory. So that night, numerous officers were actually nearby at a facility type situation, an exhibition ground, if you will, for an army tattoo. This was a dress rehearsal. But like I said earlier, the unusual marking on her face from the shoe imprint was actually noted to be consistent with canvas gaiters. And canvas gaiters are a type of shoe that were worn by soldiers at the time. Now, what colours were the gaiters available in? I'm unsure at this time. That's something I'm certainly looking at. Do I believe it was a soldier? I believe it definitely was someone who was either a current serving soldier or a past serving soldier with those shoes. So I don't think that is far-fetched at all. Then we have this next one, which I don't believe for a second, and I'll tell you why. It is the cop. So basically they're saying, oh, there was a rogue cop and he could have struck her with his motorcycle after not seeing her in the dark, and then later on returned to strangle her to ensure that she died. And basically, some doctors were saying, oh, the injuries could be explained by like contact with handlebars and things like that. But I don't know about getting hit by a motorcycle and then having your underwear taken down and your bra straps broken and then being stomped on the head kind of thing, you know what I mean? And then like thrown over the fence. So yeah, no, I don't believe that. Next, we have the handyman. So a couple of months before Betty was murdered, she had hired a handyman for a couple of house jobs on her parents' place. So when this handyman had arrived, he was expressing interest in her despite being married. So she actually rejected him and, asked him to leave. But a couple of years after her murder, this handyman's daughter told police her and her brother were in the car with their father, the handyman, one night when he pulled up at Wilson State School, which was close by Betty's place. And the daughter claimed that her handyman father left the car for a long period of time and returned covered in blood. Now, could this be true? Maybe, who knows? I can't prove it to be false right now. However, a long period of time, the crime took about 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm not sold on that one. I do believe her. I do believe her story. I think maybe her dad just beat the shit out of someone. I'm not certain that he did it, but I am certain that he probably wasn't a great person because he was married and, hitting on 22-year-old women while he was married, and also, came back to the car covered in blood. So I do believe her. I just don't think it was him. So in terms of pathways, like we said, she was dropped at this tram stop by the professor. Now, another woman arrived at that tram stop that she was boarding at shortly after she did, and they were the only two passengers to board that tram. So Betty and this other woman who arrived after her were the only two to board the tram at that stop. So aside from telling us that they're the only two who boarded the tram at that stop, and Betty did board the tram at that stop and was going in that direction, that also tells us that whoever did it did not follow her from here. They did not board the tram here and follow her from there to her tram stop. Now, she was last seen heading toward Thomas Street, like we said earlier. This is about 150 metres from the tram terminus and the location of the body. And what am I talking about this for? Because all of these metres and these times, we can make a plot. It's a very mathematical plot that you learn in forensics that kind of gives you a bit more detail. So you bet your bottom dollar I'll be doing that and sharing it with you guys. Don't ask me how long it's going to take because I'm a busy woman right now, but I will be doing it. Now this tells us one or two things, okay? Betty was followed from the terminus. So someone was at the terminus when she got off and she was followed from there, or there was someone waiting to ambush her. Okay? Options A, options B. Now, then comes along, after much digging, might I add, they don't make things easy, we have Marie Patton. And Marie came forward as a witness. She was 17 years old at the time. And she had got the same tram as Betty. And when she hopped off at the Grange Terminus, she actually walked ahead of Betty along Thomas Street by approximately 1 minute. So that's pretty close. And yeah, I would take that account seriously. She's got no reason to lie about that. But what does that tell us? And essentially that's telling us that Betty may have actually stopped to talk to someone from the terminus to the location. So any time between jumping off the tram and starting to walk to getting to the location. Because that route actually takes about 2 minutes, but it took her 7 or 8. So that's 5 to 6 unaccounted minutes. And we do have a witness that said that they saw 2 people walking together down Thomas Street approximately 9:36 p.m. So when we go back to options A and B, A followed from terminus and B waiting to ambush her, it's very likely she was followed from the terminus and she was walking that way with someone and chatting with them. Obviously, the crime did not happen until she reached the exact location of the other side of the fence from which she was thrown, because she certainly wasn't dragged all that way. So she would have been likely walking and talking with this person up until that point in time, because that's when the screams were also heard. Now, it was about 9:36 p.m. when the witnesses say that they saw 2 people walking together down Thomas Street. So again, when we put that in our little equation, we are getting a narrower and narrower time frame. Now, we don't necessarily always need the most modern forensics to solve a cold case. I think there's a lot of potential in this case. When we're looking at the blood spatter, so BPA is blood pattern analysis, which we use very, very often in forensics, and it's something that can be applied just from a photograph. And the blood spatter at this crime scene basically tells us that the assault actually took place in the yard. So the killer handled Betty Shanks over the fence and into the yard before assaulting her. So there goes the motorcyclist theory, the cop on a motorcycle that people were saying. Debunked, goodbye, throw that theory in the trash. Now, the killer removed her underwear but didn't sexually assault her. So like I said earlier, that just screams I was interrupted. And what confirms that theory that I had in my mind, that it was sexually motivated, but this person was interrupted? Well, aside from the fact that they followed a young lady home and tried to warm her up by having a nice, safe conversation and then all of a sudden attacking her, a passenger that had taken the tram after Betty, he passed this exact backyard where she was at 9:53 approximately. And that's when she died. That's when her watch stopped. So at that moment in time, the killer was likely in the yard. So what does this tell us? This tells us that the killer was likely nervous that that person or anyone else could be coming after them and see them and notice them. So they will have stopped what they were doing. Betty was well and truly dead at this point in time. She had been murdered and this person had been interrupted. minutes before the attack, we have the 17-year-old girl seeing a man in a brown suit 30 yards from the murder scene. Interesting, because 4 other people also saw a man in a brown suit in the similar area to which this young girl pointed out. Now, this comes to my most favoured theory. I'm not going to say I'm 100% on it because I haven't got where I want to be yet. But this is probably my most favoured theory. We have, let me present to you, Eric Sterry. Now, he was raised, I guess, as a suspect by his own daughter, who actually wrote a book, which I have purchased, and I am halfway through, so I will update you. And she wrote a book that titled My Dad Killed Betty Shanks. And the police didn't believe it, essentially. So she had actually gone to and from the police station 8 times to say, I think my dad did this, and she was never listened to. We have Eric Sterry, her father, who was described by numerous people as an abusive ex-soldier. You heard that right, my friends, an ex-soldier. He had those canvas gaiters that were known to make that impression on Betty's head. An abusive ex-soldier. And conveniently, he was also the local locksmith. Because he was the local locksmith, he also did the locks at the local police station. Very interesting. Now, when she went to the station and, said that she thought it was her dad, she did kind of try and back it up with some evidence. Aside from the fact saying that he was abusive in the household and that he was an ex-soldier, she said that she saw her dad naked in the backyard the very night that Betty Shanks was murdered, and he was burning his clothes. Not only that, but he actually made his daughter scrub his leather boots, my friends, leather boots, not leather dress shoes. And she found blood and tissue on the soles of these leather boots. And my last and my favourite piece of evidence against Eric Sterry is a photo that I would love to share with you that matches the 4 eyewitness statements of a man in a brown suit at the Grange Terminus waiting for a passenger to arrive. So I have a photo of Eric Sterry around that time in a brown suit, and all 4 people said that they saw him at the Grange Terminus waiting for a passenger to arrive. So I am certainly going to do a part 3 on this, but I would love to finish reading My Dad Killed Betty Shanks first. And ultimately, if you think that I am trying to get in contact with the lady who wrote that book, you are very, very right. I certainly am. I would love to chat with her. I don't believe that anyone would have, any pretenses to lie about their father doing that sort of thing, let alone write a book about it, especially back in that time, because she would have been seriously abused by him for saying that. So I would love to chat with her, and I am absolutely attempting to do that because I really want to see justice for Betty Shanks. I am so deeply invested in this. Particularly because it is the oldest cold case in Queensland, and there are so many things that we can use to put pieces together, and we can do it together. You can help me. If you want to have a look at some of the stuff I've got, send me a message, let's chat. But yeah, thank you so much. That is like my first episode off the top of my head. Because I'm so deep into it. Usually I write a script with a couple of prompts so I don't forget the order of things, but this one just lives rent-free in my mind. Anyway, that's the end of part 2 of Justice for Betty Shanks. Thank you so much for being here and listening to it. I know it was a bit of a shambles because it was just me yapping. I'd love to know your thoughts. I would love to know if you've listened to part 1 and then part 2, anything that you think. I just want to talk about it. I just want someone to talk about it with, because I think it's a very, very interesting case that tells us a lot of things, and it makes me wonder why a lot of things weren't done, and it makes me wonder if it has anything to do with Eric Sterry being a locksmith for the local police. But yeah, I have a lot of questions. And if you do, well, let's talk about it. And I'm also going to share some photos for you guys. But thank you so much for being here. I hope you have enjoyed it. You can subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes, and you can also find us on all social media platforms. Every unsolved case is a mosaic of lost fragments, and oftentimes it only takes one missing piece from the public to complete the picture. You can help these cases along by sharing our episodes and jumping onto our social media accounts to join in on the case discussions. My name is Asha. I am a forensic scientist and a criminologist who is deeply, deeply invested in Betty Shanks and getting justice for her. And you're listening to Exhuming the Truth. Stay safe.